Hello, everyone, and welcome to ProductTank Berlin. In our current chapter, I'm very excited to be introducing Christina Itwaru. She will joining us. She's joining us all the way from the US, from Pendo, as a senior director of product operations, and she will be introducing product operations to us today. From my perspective, this was a bit of a new kid on the block when I first heard about it, about 6 months to a year ago. And from my own experience being both an agile coach for a while and then becoming also a product coach, I thought it was very interesting to learn that there's an operations function to support the product teams, and this is an emerging phenomena. So without further ado, I will let Christine take over and start with the presentation.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you, Dimitri. Thanks, everyone, for spending your evening with us tonight. So really excited to talk to you about product operations in the space and how it's come to be and some of the lessons we're learning. And we can keep this interactive. If you guys have questions, make sure you're throwing them in the chat, and just ask away. I'm going to kick off before I talk through the presentation. I'll give a little background on who I am and what my role has been throughout my career. And so I've been in product management, the space, for 10 years. Prior to that, I was in product marketing. And I fell into product management by accident, really loved it, and just stayed in it, and moved from being an individual contributor back on Wall Street at a big company, over to serving more fintech customers and growing teams, building teams out, growing teams, helping them become great at the craft of product management. And then moved over to Pendo and drove product operations shortly after. I joined here initially to do product management and be director of PM here. Moved over to kick off the team, and I'll walk through what that looked like a little while after we started, a little later. So without further ado, I just went over myself, but I'm going to give a little history to kind of put things into context, and it'll help paint a picture as to why product operations is really important today in this emerging role. So the only thing constant is change. It's something I fully believe in. You're not the same as you were a minute ago, an hour ago. Nothing's the same. And so the history of product management is no exception, right? Everything has evolved. And while I was doing some research, came across some resources that pointed back to product management starting back in the 1930s by Neil McElroy, who was at Procter & Gamble at the time. And so he wrote this manifesto looking for a new role, and he called it brand men. And I think today, in today's world, we probably can't use that term. But I'll show you how that translated over the decades since product management has been alive. And so the role back then existed to study data for marketing and sales and understand what they called trouble at the time, and I equate that to pain today, and take responsibility for finding solutions, arming salespeople for understanding what it is that they need to do, and then free up time. And then in the 1940s, two founders actually learned from Neil McElroy at HP, and they matured the model that he had and originally put into place, and they work to try to bring decision-making a little bit closer to the customer and become a little bit more customer-centric. And the other thing that they did within their teams was remove layers and try to take out the marketing, sales, or layers that would exist in certain orgs, and put the people that were responsible for making these decisions and going into defining the solutions a little bit closer to the customer. On the team side, they were focusing on manageable work and making sure that if one pod, today we call it squads, pods, teams, like scrum teams, whatever term we're using in the industry, there's a million of them. You break it apart if things get a little bit too big to manage, meaning one area of your product. And so that was a nice shift in PM. And then 1950s, Toyota, that company, had a method of working called Kaizen, which was continuous innovation and improvement. And something that a lot of us in product are really familiar with is that. And it's modern day Kanban today. And their system was around plan, do, check, and act. And what they wanted was to have this culture of continuous innovation where all employees were helping to improve the company at any given time. And they had to keep structure to do that. And so in the 60s, you see a little bit more around the growth of consumer goods, which is really important and a really important milestone in this product management journey. People were trying to grab the market because competition started growing a bit more. So there was a stronger focus on marketing and customer sentiment. And if anybody knows the show Mad Men, you think about them, right? Brand men could probably be equated to what those guys were back in the day. And there was a lot of data wrangling and just understanding the market and trying to figure out continuous improvement. That definitely stayed front and center. In the 70s is when we started to see software product management emerge, which was really important and more relevant for the world we're in today. Then we had dedicated roles in the space. So there was this split focus on the product itself and then the marketing behind it. And then there was the dedicated role of the engineer to build, and then the dedicated role of the software product manager to continue to face the business. And that's a critical moment in our history. And in the 1980s, a company called Intuit, who you may be familiar with, they're a big company here in the US, established product as a core business function. And here we saw this emergence of finding an aha moment and really deeply understanding customer pain. They came up with this program called the Follow Me Home program, where they would send their product people out into people's homes to watch them install and upgrade their software and understand what the pain was. And I think my aha moment was just that. That's why I fell into product. And I always tell that story. I was sitting with a research analyst in our London office when I started in product management, and I watched him try to use a widget on the dashboard that we built. And I saw him go through the pain of understanding the data that was there and how it would be relevant to his team. That was my moment of actually wanting to become a PM, because I said, if I could solve his pain really quickly by finding something valuable for him and his team, we could do a whole lot more with this product and with the business. And so in the 1990s is when we see the confusion starting a little bit out in the industry, in the tech industry. A lot of companies started adopting Intuit's way of working. So there's the translation of business jargon to technical speak so that the engineers understand what to do with and why they're doing it. A lot more increase in competition, but the confusion started because we saw this emergence of program management, project management, and product management. And there's a lot of questions I'm sure people on this call might even have, what's the difference between your role and then those three? And that still continues a little bit into today, but there's a reason that all of those roles do exist. In the 2000s, we see a build on Kaizen system from Toyota, which is when we started to see more incremental value delivery with Agile. And today, it's all about experience versus actually touching a product. You want to feel what the organization is putting into the product that they're putting out for their customers. There's increased competition. Product now has this firm seat at the table with so many data points to manage that it's becoming a little bit of a problem for them to stay on top of everything in order to make sure that they're enhancing the experience of what the company's bringing, not just the product. And stakeholders end up being customers, right? Stakeholders are customers, and then internally you also see your customer success and sales counterparts becoming your customers and taking their feedback into consideration. And now we're seeing this emergence of this product-led motion. And so that's sort of what we're going to be talking a little bit more about today. And change also brought my team here. This is a little bit of a messy slide, but from the short period of time from August of 2019 until what's almost going to be 2 years in, this is when our product ops team kicked off here. And the Pendozer is what we call our internal people here at Pendo. We're at 359. And if I hop all the way over we're past today, we're about 520. So this was in February when I had my last hire. We started with me and one person, added another when we started to grow just a tiny bit, but really made sure we brought another on in another market and continued to adjust for the skills that we needed across the board from our product operations team. And I'll take you through what those skills are in a little bit. And as your product is growing and your product team starts to feel more pain, this is when you start to look at product operations and bringing them into the fold so that your product manager can be freed up to do all those amazing things that product managers want to do, which is the big thing is delivering value. And so why did we start ProdOps? Same thing I just mentioned is the modern product manager exists today to solve problems and create a beautiful, frictionless user experience. And it's all about experience, not tangible, but the entire package from the product and all the way out to what the people feel about the company. And they do it because they want to bring an enjoyable, productive experience to their customers. So in order to do this, they should be focusing on understanding their customers and being servant leaders for their teams, meaning their designer counterpart, and their engineering partners. And so what it looks like, what everybody wants to see is this happy path and outcome for customers, which is they need an enjoyable, productive experience. Some of our champions are responsible for realizing ROI from buying a product such as Pendo, any product that you're managing. They also want to see continued incremental product value. And they should have this frictionless onboarding and continued adoption of any new features that are coming out. And so in the middle, there's this expectation of the customer-facing team, which is that their goals and what they're paid off of is knowing enough about a product to sell the value and sell the product, knowing enough in order to show the value. And then the next thing is, from a success perspective, knowing enough about the product to train and retain customers. And then on the PM side, I'm not going to go through every one of them, but the big thing again is solving problems. That's why PMs and product people exist. And so we want to be able to create a beautiful, frictionless user experience overall. And that includes owning roadmap planning and execution, managing stakeholders, deeply understanding customers, and being really collaborative. And so in this little slice here, there's nothing, right? And so all of this is what it takes to get to the end goal, but there's more than that if you're thinking about the experience piece and longevity of your company. So what's going on is, we see this pain where there's an amount of stakeholders that just keeps growing, and the product manager can't keep up, right? They're not going to be able to scale unless they're not sleeping. And then if they're not sleeping, obviously they're going to lose sight of where they're supposed to be going. And so scale becomes really critical. And so the expectations are what I showed you, but the reality is that they're also responsible for all of these other pieces. And that's covering all beta and general release pieces, writing external and internal docs, being a trainer, aligning everybody, being ready to assist with deals, maintaining a voice of customer feedback program, all of these other things that have traditionally fallen, or more recently, I would say, because we think about it in the 70s, have fallen from the 70s to now on the PM's plate. And so we exist in product operations to empower and align product managers and revenue teams and help them achieve successful outcomes for customers. So we aim here at Pendo to reduce friction and create a delightful experience. And that's not for just our external customer. We are working to create an experience for our product manager, for our sales and success teams, and then ultimately, again, for the end user, our customer. And so, when I bring new people onto my team and we're coaching and we're talking about how we make ourselves better, is I always remind them that we're building all the non-features necessary to win in product. Our product managers focus on finding innovative solutions for our market and working with our engineering team on building those out and really just getting them out to our customers' adoption, making sure that we're marketing them well is something that we also partner with them on. But who's doing all that, right? And so that's when it comes back to all those little things that end up getting people assume certain other roles are taking on those responsibilities. And so we do this by creating and driving process, being really rigorous around all of the things that we do create in terms of process, focusing on operational excellence across the company. So aligning our data flows with other products as necessary internally here at Pendo. And I know a lot of the customers I speak with are doing the same thing. And really partnering, like the key word is partnership, because we can't win in this role without having true partnership from these counterparts. And so those are the ingredients in the recipe for enabling growth at scale. So we go back to why, start with why, back to why. PMs exist to solve problems and create this beautiful experience. And so, it's to bring an enjoyable, productive experience to their customers, right? So every little thing in that journey matters. It is the product experience, including the experience for your internal teams and the non-tangible product-related items. Some of those problems that we see that are internal focused are, how do I make my customers happy? They want this feature. They want this to be brought to market soon. They want answers. Can you help me de-risk my account? Something doesn't feel right here. They need a little more expertise. I personally, as a CSM or a salesperson, need more training and enablement to be ready. I need to hear more pain from the product side, right? Product managers come to us often and say, I'm not hearing enough of this in the market. Is there a real need for this, right? Can you help me with this? A lot of people are saying, help me get great content, right? Like there's a lot of great things that we say Pendo on Pendo here. We dog food our product all the time. And, one of the things we do is we use our feedback tool, which collects all user feedback and categorizes it and helps us work with the PMs on figuring out the right things to work on. And what people like is like, teach us how the product ops team at Pendo uses this. And I imagine if there are folks on the phone here who use their own products, I'm sure that the people that are selling those products want to learn from you on, what it is that you're doing to make your day better. Keep me up to speed, just alignment. General alignment is a really critical business component. And a lot of people don't focus on it because there's an assumption that somebody's got it. Somebody's got something, and that's not always the case. Consistency is another thing. Nobody wants to relearn what format, they should be reading a new feature document in. Nobody wants to relearn how to submit a feedback ticket. Keep things consistent and make sure you're championing it, and make me look good. Again, it kind of goes back to make my customers happy. How do you keep everybody enabled and empowered to do their jobs really well? And so we do this by operating with a PM mindset in product operations. And so we identify pain, we set milestones or goals, test and iterate, share processes widely. We stop and we measure success and then optimize for maximum adoption. And then when we feel really good about a process, we finalize and document it and then continue to measure success and then continue to do this process all over again. And so an example of this is just what I mentioned before, is we have a feedback tool where we needed to get our internal folks to adopt process behind putting customer feedback in there. And there was pain around, we've got Zendesk, we've got spreadsheets, we've got emails, we've got customers making their own sheets. And so the problem was, okay, we've got all of those sources, but if you don't put all those sources together and make sense of all that data, quantitative and qualitative, we're missing an opportunity in the market to go after something really special. And so we had to sell that story to our internal teams and then sell the other side of it, which is product managers, you need to be in there and making sure that you're taking action on some of these things. Make sure that you're showing our sellers and our success managers that you're on top of your game and listening to the voice of the customer. And we went through several iterations of it. And so, we went through and got to a point where we now put out a public feedback policy. And we said, this is what we're doing with all the feedback that our customer, are sending in. And that's gone over really well. And so that's just an example of some of the things that our product operations team has built process around. Other things are rigor around releases, managing betas, making sure that the right candidates are in the betas and you're collecting feedback at any point. Managing product escalations. We have somebody who, when something is escalated pretty high from our technical success team, it hits one of our product ops managers, and he's really technical and he works with our engineers directly to get that resolved. Issue communication. If there's something going on that's widespread that we need to communicate out to our customers, we're a part of that. So the product team doesn't have to get involved in the nitty-gritty and planning of all of that. Planning and alignment. Making sure that you are working with your agile team or your program management team, whichever team in-house is working on figuring out with the product manager and the engineer what good planning looks like. How do you plan out a year ahead or a quarter ahead, whatever your cadence is, and then align the organization to all the things that your teams are going to be doing. That's part of our role. Customer inputs is another one. Again, voice of customer, really important. The other piece of it is that's really important is NPS that comes in, qualitative, quantitative, data health, making sure that all of the data in Pendo is clean, for example, Salesforce, and knowledge base. These are just some of the things that we've put process around here at Pendo, and we'll continue to do more as time goes on. But again, it's all the things that product teams need to have a pulse on so that they know what's out there in front of them so they can make really informed decisions. And for people who make really good products candidates, I am happy to share skills, but also I recently put out a poll on feedback that got some really great answers that I'll share with you in a little bit. So the role is relatively new. We are going to be in it for 2 years now, and we're doing a lot of the driving here in the US and now out more in Europe and in Asia of the role itself. So we're in a good seat to learn from others around what they're trying to do with product operations in their organization as well. And so what we're finding is the skills that feel really good for this role are empathy, They are focused on data. They embrace rigor. I mentioned the process piece a lot. They have to be quite flexible. Things change at any given moment, especially as your company is growing really quickly. So you have to remember to pause and reflect and change course if needed. Be a strong communicator, written and verbal communication. Be really trustworthy, because you are sitting in the seat where people are sharing their customer frustrations, and you want them to be able to give you as much information as possible. You're also amplifying the success of the PM in the product ops role. And that's a beautiful seat to be in, because you want your product manager to say, here's where I'm going with this. Can you just take this and be my PR internally? And that's been incredible to see here at Pendo. Our product ops managers have built this relationship with our PMs where they trust them to just run with things. Be very customer centric. Maniacally focused on the customer is what you should be in any product role. I think it's equal for any of the roles that fall under product, no matter where you are. And then be a strong collaborator, because in the beginning, especially if the role is new to your organization, you want to establish relationships across the business, because that's how you're going to execute. You need everybody's partnership in order to drive your goals forward, because you're not working for the product team. I'll show you where a lot of people are sitting today in terms of reporting. You're working for the entire organization as a product operations person, and you're really focusing on helping the company stay aligned and empowered, and that's everyone that you're touching. And so, before I took a role in product operations, this is a survey I put out on LinkedIn. I wanted to see what people were saying. 2 years ago when I started thinking about this, I was asking, well, which backgrounds would be relevant for this role? And so I was surprised and really happy to see that product management, it came out as number one in terms of where people were before they took on a product ops role. It wasn't a high number of votes. It was 81, but 37% were there. And then the next click down was another discipline, which, a couple of them in the thread from LinkedIn said management consulting, training and education, data science, and consulting. So a mix of different things here. And then the other side of it was customer and technical success. And so I share this because the makeup of my team is interesting, where I'm the only person with a product management background, and there are 6 of us. The rest of my team has a training and education background for 1 person, and 4 people that were in the world of technical success. And I'd be interested to see how this grows, especially as we go and grow this role in different markets. And this is the one I mentioned where I wanted to see where product ops teams report into. And the majority of these teams are reporting today into product management, which makes sense from a goals perspective. When you start setting goals, you don't want it to be tied to a dollar value that you're tied to hitting each quarter. It's more about value that you're giving to the organization, and then long-term growth. And so I'll share a couple lessons learned, and we'll end the presentation. And one is to be intentional, embrace and own your process. You have to be a leader in this role. One of the things I learned from the folks who came over from our success roles into my team is that they went from a space of being really reactive to a space of being proactive. And so they need to embrace the fact that they're able to push change and own the processes and all the things that they're doing. You have to listen to the pain of your company as your product team works on the experience through the product. Help them stay really focused while you're listening to the pain of everyone else in the organization around how they can get better at doing well for the product and for the company. And focus on change and adoption, and then set measurable goals. I get asked a lot, what are your KPIs? What do you guys use for measurements of success? And so when you're starting a product operations shop or a role in your org, it's all about embracing the change and having that buy-in from your leadership team to make sure that people are seeing that you're going to be setting processes in place that are going to set people up for long-term success. And the adoption of those processes is the first thing you need in order to get there. And then you can start to set some measurable goals a little bit later on. And so my team and I sat down and we came up with some words of wisdom. And so I mentioned it earlier, but you're in the best seat in the house. So make sure you're using it wisely. If anybody on this call is in product ops, don't take things personal. Every individual has a different measured outcome in your company. So just make sure yours is always aligned to the company's goals. And I say that because you're going to get pulled into different directions. Customer success will want you to work on ARR and NRR goals. That means, more retention and more revenue goals that are focused on keeping them safe in their jobs. Salespeople will work on or be focused more on bringing new business in, and your product managers are going to be focused on, value for the customer. And there's this delicate balance that you have to walk. So just make sure your goals are always aligned to your company's yearly, quarterly, whatever they are goals. And don't be afraid to say no to some things, because when you start this role, as with any new role, it's ambiguous when your organization may have other roles in place that are taking on some responsibilities. So make sure that you're stating why. If you're saying no to things, don't take everything on in the beginning. You may feel inclined to. But I think that was a big lesson learned for us. We took so much on that we couldn't do so much of it well. Just state your why behind it. And thank you. That is the end of this presentation. I'm happy to take questions and entertain discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What an inspiring talk. It was really, really interesting. I love that you've basically taken all the product manager mindset, right? Being external facing, except of course for some teams, and bringing that to an internal focused team, right? Where you develop the same almost discovery, empathy, discovery, understanding the pain points, right, of the teams, and what can you do, right, in order to solve their problems and get out of the way and let them do their job. That's really interesting. From a personal experience, I remember at some point I realized I could run design thinking workshops for teams that were supporting other teams, right? So you had HR, right, who was wondering, what does it mean for HR to be able to keep supporting all the different departments in a time of agile transition, right? And so we ran design thinking workshops at that time to be able to help them. And it's really incredible to see that kind of spread out and become a proper function for supporting product ops.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. And I think you're right. Like the mindset of a PM and the heart of a PM goes a long way in a lot of things from a business perspective. And I think if people try to tackle too many things at once, they forget that they should be trying to incrementally deliver value, because that's where the big value ends up coming into play, is when you start to deliver little slices of it. It just delights more people than you think. But if you're trying to attack too many things and not really thoughtful about it and just kind of have a finger in the air, here's what I think, you're not going after the data. And so make sure you're intentional about the stuff you're picking and doing.
Yeah, right. So a question from Simon Hoff. Where do you draw the line between POs and product ops for tasks nobody wants to do, or for tasks that both want to do?
That's a good question. So when we started here, we sat down and did a survey with our product managers and said, we want to make sure we're focusing on the right things. There's a lot of pain within the organization, within this team, and we want to make sure you're spending your time the right way. So Simon, one thing that came out of that was an understanding that they were putting time towards things that they didn't feel were really relevant, and some of them were tackling support tickets all the time. So I mentioned there's somebody who's responsible for escalating all of those and being technical enough to get it done. Another thing was arming sales and educating them all the time in success around roadmap and around new features. And so those are things that were lifted to the surface, and we had a healthy conversation about it. And we said, is it that you don't want to do it, or is it that you feel you shouldn't do it? What will it give you? If we take this from you, what will you be freed up to do? And we started a list. And so even today, some new things come up. There was something that came up this morning with my call, or in my call with one of my employees in Israel, and she mentioned something about data collection, and I said to her, I think this is great for you to own, and there's a question from the product side, is should she own it? And so now we're having an open discussion around what it means to that product manager's role. Is it going to help them free up time, or is it something that they know that they can lean on her and partner with her to understand a little bit more deeply? So that's my advice, is you have to have a healthy discussion with your product team, your product managers. Some things are standard: release, betas, documentation, roadmap, not building it, but actually updating it and championing it and all of that stuff. When lines start to get blurry, I always encourage a healthy conversation.
Thanks. Siddharth was asking, at what product team size does having product ops become valuable?
Let's see. I'm not going to compare it, or I'm not going to say what we had at Pendo because every company is different. I would say you want to look at the growth within your organization in order to figure out when you need product operations. If you're growing really quickly and you know that the PM now has a responsibility, or your PMs have a responsibility to develop against a really heavy roadmap, very either long-term or short-term, and you could see that the pain is going to come. It's not just going to be on the PM to, the pain's not going to be just relegated to them building. It's going to be to them enabling and making sure that the organization is ready. And so I would just ask, take a look at the organization and find out what the goals are in terms of growth. And then the other side of it too is the customer size. How many customers are you acquiring? Generally, it's customer acquisition, and then it's sales, then customer acquisition, and then it kind of keeps going back and forth. You've got a bit of customer success teams growing, and then product ends up being a little bit last. So you want to raise the flag a little early and say, hey, I feel that at some point we're going to need to put process in because we have to worry about scale. And so I tend to see a lot of companies say when they've got about 3 or 4 product managers and product and engineering teams, that's when they raise the flag and they say, ooh, I think that things are starting to feel a little painful. And on the product side, I just realized something. Siddharth does love this question. On the product side, there's this element of helping them de-risk anything that might be coming up when they're building out a roadmap. And so our product manager, one of them, for example, focuses on 4 product teams and 4 product areas. And so she looks a level above and says, I heard this from this PM. I heard this from this PM. Are you guys making sure you're aligned here? So if there's an alignment piece that's missing as well within your own product org, you should be thinking about this as well.
Thanks. A question from Casper. Any recommendations for how to efficiently align product with the rest of the organization during, for example, a quarter or whichever time frame the company works in? Roadmaps, town halls, newsletters?
Yeah, I think I would probably want to understand what size of company you have and what cadence you guys are planning in. Generally, well, I think we over-communicate. I tend to over-communicate. I talk a lot, as you can probably see. My products team makes sure that we send out a weekly update to our entire organization because we're growing so quickly. I'm in my office today at Pendo, and there are at least 10 or 12 people I don't even know who they are. And that's very scary, right? We were in a very remote world. So you want to make sure you're having some sort of contact with people. What we do to make sure people are aware of the role and what the purpose is here at Pendo is we are involved in our new hire training. We have someone covering product management proper, like, hey, these are the teams that fall underneath it. And then we talk about product operations and what it is we do. In terms of roadmaps, that's quarterly. So we'll work with the PMs on making sure that there's a quarter roadmap out, potentially 2. And now we're trying to see if we can get a vision roadmap out for about a year. Town hall is a space that we use to just remind people of the function as the company continues to grow a little bit more, or a lot, not a little bit.
All right. Thanks. A follow-up question by Siddharth. How involved, if at all, is product ops then in roadmap planning?
The actual work, the actual things that are going to be executed, we're there for the data piece. So if we're seeing trends come up with our counterparts in sales or success, we're highlighting that to our PMs to say, while you guys are going through planning, it's really important for you to consider that in our enterprise space, we're seeing this. We potentially want to get ahead of it. We also end up partnering with our product marketing team to see if they have any competitive intel behind that, so we can package it and give it to our PMs. And that's generally happening on a quarterly basis. And then the planning itself, like the actual tactical planning, we partner really closely with our Agile team to help make sure that all of that is smooth. I hope that answers that question.
So. Let's take a couple of other questions. Yeah, I think we still have a bit of time. Given the mindset of a PM is key to succeed in here, can you speak to the value of hiring people with a non-PM background? And then do you train them to be PMs?
I love that question. There's so much value in bringing people on that don't have a that have a non-PM background. I'm very proud of my product ops team. Each one of them comes with different experience, and every single one of them are the same in that they're empathetic, trusted people here at Pendo who know our customers very well and are very neutral in times of distress. And I think that those skills are transferable no matter where you come from. As long as you have them, it's something for you to bring to the table, and very process oriented, as I mentioned. And so, yes, the second part of it, do I train them to be PMs? I think I'm going to read that two different ways. When I bring someone new on and they don't have a product manager background, it's a little bit harder for me to get them into the flow of how to think and how to operate in the product ops space. But it's not harder in that it's hard. It's just a challenge because they don't have that mentality from their previous job. What we do is we 2 times a year, I've done just a retraining of my team. And if I bring someone else on, I'll do an individual training. Like, here's how PMs think. This is how we break problems down. They get it pretty quickly. And then for some who are a little bit more reactive, I do have to go in and our one-on-one just kind of remind them of the process. I think that question can also be interpreted as do I train them to be PMs, meaning do we then offer a career path out from product ops into product management? It's something that I have not seen yet. We haven't done it here. I've seen the opposite now with our customers, where our customers are saying, I'm a PM who does all of this. Why not formalize it and get paid for it? Why not do more of this and champion this? And so they go from product into product operations. So that's why that statistic was a little bit surprising to me, because I thought I would see more folks coming with a non-PM background into the role who want to get into product. But it's been the opposite more recently, which is product managers thinking that they want to kick this off because it's a really sweet spot for them.
Oh, that's very interesting. Another question from Mahul. Who is responsible for monitoring the KPIs of a product? Product ops versus PMs, right? And who's the one to raise the flag if KPIs don't perform as expected?
The shared responsibility here for our team. I see it shift from customer to customer. When we do betas, we are setting KPIs for adoption and stickiness and retention. And so when we are going, let's say we have a beta that's going to run for 4 weeks, our product ops manager, who partners with our, let's say, guidance team, is checking that. She has we call it weekly 360. So in addition to her sending out a weekly update email on everything that's going on in products, what's dropped, what's not, what's new, she does a weekly touch base with our PMs. And in that meeting is the PM, the product ops person, the lead engineer, the designer, if they choose to join, the agile scrum master, and the product marketing manager. And they're setting KPIs pre-beta release. And she's reminding them each week where they are against their goal. They're probably checking it themselves as well. Again, we do use our own product and we can see that on our dashboards. But it is a shared goal. If something's falling short, let's say in terms of adoption, we're digging into why from the internal side, and marketing is digging into why from the external side.
All right, thank you. A question from us, actually. Some people find it threatening for responsibilities to be taken away from them. How do you suggest to deal with this, right? How should product ops and PMs develop trust together?
I love that question. So I go back to a little earlier in the presentation where it's, what is the role of a product manager? Why do they exist? And they really do exist to solve problems for the customer and drive customer delight and a great experience. And if they are doing all of these other things that are taking away from doing that and solving for internal pain, alongside the role of them marching towards their roadmap and talking to customers, it's very easy. I've yet to meet someone who tells me, knocking on wood, I've yet to meet someone who says to me, they're not trusting that story. PMs are, I say we because I've been in the role for a while, right? Or I wasn't a while. You get pulled into so many different directions, and to know you have a partner who you can trust to not take the credit from you. I think that's another piece of it. Again, that trustworthy bit. When I talk to product ops people and people on my team here or outside, like the big piece is making sure that you feel good about that person and how they're representing you when you are not there in the room. And how they're representing the product, right? And then that goes back to the product ops person needs to be aligned to the company's goals. And that means that they have the best interests of the PM team at heart. So I think that it hasn't been so much of a threat from folks I've spoken to, and it hasn't been that here. I think that our PMs, if anything, are really excited to know that they can focus their energy on quality time with customers and quality time with their team.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I think we're right on time. This might have been the last question. Following, thank you very much, Christine. For this really insightful presentation. It's really interesting, and I really think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this all over the world, right? Maybe in Europe or in the US, right? As all these scaling startups need to be able to support their PMs, right? We often see the PMs are just always overwhelmed, as you mentioned. There's so many things that they have to do. And they cannot stretch more than, more than they can. So it was very inspiring, and I look forward to being able to experience that myself at some point in a company. Who knows? Maybe as a product operations myself.
Yeah.
So yes, moving forward, I will be sharing a link in the chat for some quick networking on Wonder, and I look forward to seeing you there. Bye.